Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto and Ino started a secret affair that pulled Hinata, Sakura and others into his dangerous love. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Ouch. SSSEH. Tay. Quote, "Please don't be difficult Shikamaru-kun," said Hinata in as terse a tone as she could muster. Shikamaru settled down as she continued treatment and could only sigh in disgust for a reply. He had badly bruised the ribs on his left side when the Sound Nins had launched that earth attack from underneath them. Leaning back against the offending piece of rubble he'd flown into, he tried to be a good patient for his medical ninja. I had been so focused on Kabuto, he thought, it was such a genuine mistake. Very stupid. He was not used to making stupid mistakes. Mistakes meant failed missions and failed missions usually meant dead teammates. All done, declared Hinata as she got up. Her face shed its look of concentration and was replaced with a pleased smile. Hinata was a perfectionist when it came to her medical skills. Given her mentors were Shizune-sama and Tsunade-sama, she had some high expectations to uphold. Shikamaru stood slowly and wandered over to the pit where Tenten and Sakura were to see how they were doing with their find. "It can't be touched," Sakura said, crossing her arms in a reflex of frustration. Tenten rose from where she was crouched. "And we can't use a rope either, catches fire in seconds." Shikamaru rubbed his chin. "Things that don't burn," he volunteered. Sakura shook her head while Tenten explained. "We tried lifting it with the flat sides of our kunai, but the metal got too hot before we could even get out of the hole. It's like it doesn't want to be moved." The solution came to him immediately, but he wasn't sure what the consequences would be. Either way they had to get moving soon. Kabuto and his shinobi should have been showing up to counterattack any minute now. "I'm going to use Kage Intoku no Jutsu," he told them, and seeing their concerned looks immediately added, "We haven't got any other ideas and we can't afford to waste time." The Kage Intoku, or concealing shadow, was one of the last family jutsu his father had taught him. It gave the user the ability to absorb and carry objects within their shadow, completely hiding it from detection. The limitation was that the weight of the object would be added to your own. It felt almost like your bones got heavier. In fact, his father once made him take an 80-kilo stone on as a training device. Shikamaru had planned to get even with him for that one. He was also pretty sure if you absorbed something too heavy your body would be crushed instantly. Warily he jumped into the pit and formed the seal, molding his chakra to the jutsu. He watched his shadow stretch under the glowing scroll and thicken as the object slid into its depths. His shadow shrunk back to size as he released the seal. Leaping back out of the hole, the women all examined him questioningly. "Light as a feather," he told them with a reassuring nod. He took one step when his legs gave way. Hinata rushed to his side, but he was up quickly, waving her off. "Hinata, I'm fine. Just got dizzy for a sec, probably the knock from before. Anyway, let's get out of here, I've had it with this place." He checked his gear briefly before giving sign to move out. They were out of Nagayama by early evening and the full moon lit their swift path along the treetops of western Konoha. Shikamaru felt incredibly thirsty and was about to whistle for a water break when he realized that the branches were smacking him in the face in mid-freefall. Their sting was nothing to him as he passed from conscientiousness. "What? Where?" Hinata's strained face swam above him. "Shikamaru, you're burning up with fever, you need to release the scroll now." "I must be lying down," he thought. Shikamaru tried to focus on Hinata's face as he spoke to her. "No. Too risky, we need to get back." His eyes began to lose focus as heard the sounds of other female voices. He was sure he knew them from somewhere, but couldn't catch what they were saying. "I can keep going just," and with that he slipped away again into the blackness. Shikamaru woke up on a couch in the Hokage's office. His head felt so heavy and he needed a drink so badly. "Water," he croaked. Tsunade was there beside him, her hand firmly cradling his head as she pressed a cup to his lips. He swallowed hurriedly, causing fit of choking. "Shikamaru," said Tsunade in a commanding voice. "I need you to release the scroll now. You must end your jutsu." Obeying her, he brought his trembling hands together and breathed out, "Kai," to release the scroll. He slid back into sleep as a wonderful coolness suffused his body. It was on that same couch in the Hokage's office he found himself again when he awoke. The sunlight from the window played crossed his face and he sat up to see more clearly. "Ahaya, squad leader." Shikamaru squinted to see Tenten lounging in on a windowsill near the door. She was the only other person in the room. He looked down and immediately noticed the large blackened spot on the Hokage's floor. "Yeah," Tenten began, "Tsunade-sama had to move the scroll right after you released it. We told her it would burn anything, but I don't think even she was ready for it. She was worried about you too." He nodded. What he had done was pretty reckless and very unlike him. "That's what I get for trying to make up for my Kabuto blunder," he thought to himself soberly. "What time is it?" he asked. Tenten grabbed a teapot and cup from the desk and brought it over to him. "Shouldn't you be asking me what day it is?" She fell into a chair next to his makeshift bed. "The tea's only about an hour old, but you, my dear, have been out for 2.5 days since you fell out of that tree." Shikamaru poured for himself and asked, "2 days, how'd I get here then?" Tenten picked up her arm and flexed a muscle. "Hey, I'm one cute package, but I'm built tough." She grinned. "We all took turns carrying you. You're getting too skinny, by the way, you should eat more." He sighed at the comment and brought the cup to his lips. Shikamaru's hands froze midair and he emitted a groan. Eating made him think of. He sputtered, "Ino, was told," finished Tenten, "you were still on a mission for Tsunade-sama, very top secret." There was a brief knock and they turned to see the Hokage entering her office. "There's my top strategist," Tsunade exclaimed. "How's the patient?" The weapons kunoichi stood and replied, "He looks okay to me." She ruffled his head of loose hair and strolled toward the exit. "Catch ya later, Shikamaru-kun." Tsunade went to sit at her desk and they waited to speak until the door shut behind Tenten. Shikamaru had found the leather string he used as a hair tie on an end table and gathering up his hair with both hands he began speaking with it in his mouth. "So, what is it?" he mumbled through clenched teeth. Tsunade spread her hands. "I was hoping you could tell me," she said. "We know it's a summoning contract of some sort and probably something with an affinity toward fire, but that's it. I've had a number of Junin up to look at it, even brought Elder Kaharu in here to see it. No one can touch it though." The Hokage smiled wryly. "Right now, I have it in the next room on a metal scroll stand in a tub of water to absorb the heat. It gets a little steamy, but I just keep adding more water every couple hours. Bet I could make a fortune in the portable hot springs business." "Can it be opened then?" he asked. "Oh yes," Tsunade assured him. "I'm just not sure if we have anyone strong enough in the elemental nature it represents." Shikamaru wasn't sure he believed what she was saying. "Hokage-sama, you mean to tell me that the leaf doesn't have a ninja strong enough in fire?" It sounded almost too ridiculous to say. She stood, looking very tired suddenly, and walked over to the window. "You might not believe this, Shikamaru-kun, but that could be true. Being fire country, we have more powerful fire techniques and a greater number of that jutsu type than any other shinobi country. However, true strength in any single element is rare. That's why we were so excited by Hinata," she continued. "Her talent in wood-type jutsu, even at a middling level, is exceptional. Elemental strength can't be bred like an advanced bloodline and it's hard to predict who will have what abilities. There are patterns though. In fact, Sakura just wrote a wonderful paper on the natural equilibrium in." As she spoke, the Hokage turned to see Shikamaru dozing away peacefully. Feeling her left eye start to twitch uncontrollably, she screeched, "Shikamaru! Are you listening?" The shadow ninja tumbled off the couch along with his pillows and blanket. "Huh, yeah sure, fire bad, tree pretty, right?" He blurted out. Tsunade could only shake her head ruefully. Go home and get some rest, you are still not 100%. He nodded his head in absent agreement and Tsunade softened as she watched him gather himself to leave. How's Ino-san doing? Shikamaru gave her a slightly sour look before replying. Women always seem to want to talk about his relationship. She's well, enjoying her classes, organizing for the festival, finding homes for small kittens. You know her, she's like some goodwill juggernaut. Tsunade laughed at his view. Well, today she's returning from an overnight field trip with her class and won't be back till this evening. So, you have the day to rest up. He was about to turn and leave when it all clicked together. How did you know she was on a field trip? Tsunade's eyes widened in false innocence. Oh, I just had Iruka-sensei give her the assignment when you got back. I see, he said, giving her a slanted look. The Hokage dissembled. Sakura's a horrible liar, Shikamaru-kun. Once Ino got a hold of her it would have been over. Then I'd have had her camped in here every day with you lying there like a sack of azuki beans, asking over and over about why I wasn't doing anything. Tsunade agreed with his former comment, like you said, a juggernaut. Shikamaru felt his bed calling him urgently and he stumbled out of the door. The fifth Hokage sighed slightly as he departed. She really needed to keep her fondness for her younger charges in check. Many of them, including the young man who just left, would not see middle years due to their profession. If another major war was to come upon the Leaf, they could lose a whole generation again. She was pleased to sense the arrival of her next guest as these worries circled in her mind. You're late as usual, Kakashi, she said. In response, a puff of nin smoke appeared in the middle of the room, followed by the unabashed nin. My apologies, Hokage-sama. I was passing through Tanza when some young women asked me to dance for them. Tsunade ignored his antics and waited to hear his report. If things up north were as bad as she thought, she would be making those tough choices all too soon. It was early morning as Neji surveyed the layout of the bandit camp from a high vantage in the trees. As he waited for the others to get in position for the attack, he took another chance to scan the area with his Byakugan. I don't like this, he thought. There's something not right here. When he first received word from Anko that his team had been assigned to yet another blow it up job by the Hokage, he was starting to get the impression that was all she thought his team was good for. He knew she gave more important missions to that slacker Shikamaru, but he still wasn't sure why. It just ate at him. Now, looking below at yet another sizable camp of 100-odd mercenaries that had built up on the border between fire and lightning countries, he began to see an odd pattern. The perimeter was neat and orderly with staked torches and tight-looking sentries, while the interior layout of tents and fires was scattered, almost sloppy-looking. The waking fighters moving sluggishly about the camp definitely didn't look like Ronins. In fact, they were more like street thugs. Certainly nothing a ninja village like Konoha needed to worry about. They don't even look well fed, he realized. The supply lines at the back of the camp were top caliber in their layout as well. Carts were loaded with foodstuffs and weaponry, all lined up neatly behind teams of oxen. The pack animals were tethered in a straight row along well-tended feed lines. It made for an odd picture. The strangest thing had to be the large blue tent at the center of the encampment. It was obviously where the leaders were, but there was no traffic in and out its entrance. Neji noticed how all the bandits were carefully to steer clear and not get too close to it. With his heightened senses, he could read body language of those passing by, and every one of them made sure to avert their eyes in a clear display of avoidance. Neji watched as one guy who looked like a real bruiser strolled by the tent's entrance. The man was strong-looking and knew it. He had that arrogant walk of a bully declaring his dominance over others. As a breeze caught at the tent's flap and cast it ajar, the man's appearance faltered. His toughness melted away and was replaced by a far different look. One that Neji was fond of seeing only in his worst enemies. Terror, he said to himself at a whisper. This man feared punishment, and it was something he knew well. His entire body cringed in a way that said it was recalling a past lesson in pain. He had been made a recent example of by someone in that tent. I don't like this at all, Neji thought. He took a breath and brought his fingers to his lips. He was ready to whistle the signal to abort the mission, when he stopped in mid-motion. Damn it! He exhaled. The attack had already begun. On cue, a red blur raced out of the trees along the brush line. Its target was the line of animals in front of the supply carts. Akamaru had grown to full size as Kiba had passed his 15th birthday. The Inuzuka clan, having long bred their dogs for strength, stamina and intelligence, had achieved much in Akamaru. The canine was just smaller than an average-sized man and had more chakra ability than even his sire, Komaru. With his hackles raised, he resembled some nightmarish Oni wolf as he descended on the camp. Seeing the dog, the oxen broke their lines and with the him snapping at their flanks were driven into a frenzy, running over tents and people alike. A couple of sentries tried in vain to stop Akamaru by throwing shuriken and kunai, but the projectiles merely bounced from his hide. His master had given him a soldier pill, turning his fur that frightening crimson color. The dog also employed a technique that Kiba called kutetsu, iron fur, which deflected such flimsy attacks. Kiba, looking like a possessed beast himself, quickly joined his pet in the fray. Neji saw a flash of yellow from the opposite side of clearing as Naruto moved into position. He ran toward a massive oak at the edge of camp and using his Rasengan, the nin bent low, ripping through the tree's trunk near its base. As he stood to full height, his fist whipped around to hammer into the tree, guiding the toppling giant's fall. The strike directed it to land deep into the confusion. The crash was followed by a dozen eager blonde doppelgangers jumping into the fight. In a puff of nin smoke, Neji materialized unseen behind a group of armed guards just south of the action. They stood open-mouthed in awe at the spectacle unfolding before them. Neji moved silently among them like a specter and with his Jiyuken dispatched them with little effort. A low rumble signaled the arrival of the final team member coming down a steep slope off of a northern hillside. Choji's Nikuden Sensha meat tank blasted through the log barriers in place and the sentries fled from its path. While in battle, Neji never stopped paying attention to the big blue tent and even now saw that no one left or entered it even with all the commotion. Choji's taijutsu picked up speed as he aimed straight for it. It was one of the few things left standing. The pale-eyed ninja held his breath a little as he paused his own attack to see what would happen. "Come on, Choji," he prayed silently. "Prove me wrong and flatten that thing." The Akamichi taijutsu specialist thundered towards his target when Neji caught a movement at the tent flap. He strained to see more as Choji's mass blocked his view. "It doesn't matter now," Neji tried to assure himself. No one could just stop the meat tank attack that close. The comforting thought did little to stop his jaw from dropping open as he watched his bad feeling unfold. Choji bounced back into the air after being deflected hard off of something. The chubby nin lost his multi-size effect midair and hit ground, grasping at his stomach in agony. Neji observed a dark-haired man of slight build standing in front of the tent. He was cloaked in a midnight blue cape with a swirling red cloud pattern and his forehead protector had its country symbol scratched out. An escaped nin, Neji guessed as he moved toward the man. He looked familiar somehow. Akamaru broke through a group of bandits he was menacing to charge the new threat when the mysterious figure locked his gaze on the dog. The hulking beast froze in his tracks and began to whimper and shake uncontrollably. Kiba, seeing his distress, was quickly beside him. "Akamaru, what's the matter?" he asked. The nin dog continued to cry and moved to hide behind Kiba's legs. "What's wrong?" he yelled in frustration. The dog hadn't acted like this since it had first seen Gaara so long ago. Neji walked cautiously toward the man. "Who are you?" he demanded. The rogue ninja's voice was mild, almost pleasant despite the flat, hard line of his mouth. He responded smartly, "Oh, I'm just a traveler." "My apologies," he said, his eyes moving over to where Choji was still struggling to stand. "I saw your ball and couldn't resist kicking it." The Byakugan emerged on Neji's face as he took up the ready stance. "I see, your Hyuga clan, Hajimemashite," the stranger said in mild surprise. Neji was done with talking. As he moved to attack, he heard Naruto yelling from far behind them. Neji, wait! He closed the distance between him and his opponent in a heartbeat. He thrust his hand forward in a lethal strike and suddenly the man was gone. Where the hell? Neji exclaimed. The pale-eyed nin felt a fingertip press lightly on the middle of his back. This is where that blind spot is, nay, said the man who somehow got behind him. Neji turned and launched another strike again into thin air as the disappearing act was repeated. He still felt the man's finger resting lightly on the one place he couldn't see. Neji gritted his teeth in anger. He readied his Kaden heavenly spin when he felt a crushing grip on his shoulder, stopping him from turning. There's no need for that now, the man said into his ear softly, after all we're practically cousins. He knew what I was going to do, Neji thought in shock. He saw Naruto running up to them as the man released his shoulder. Itachi, you bastard, yelled Naruto. It all fell into place as Neji turned to face the stranger who had backed away out of range of the Kaden. Uchiha Itachi. Itachi nodded his head in the slightest of bows to Neji's recognition. Naruto-kun, the Hyuga boy here was about to show me his greatest attack, explained the psychotic nin. I feel it only impolite, he continued, if I don't show him mine. Neji watched as the blood-red Sharingan swirled up from the depths of Itachi's black eyes. Mange Sharingan. Neji heard himself start screaming as he fell under the hellish jutsu. Naruto arrived in time to catch Neji as he collapsed and watched the Byakugan faded from his blank staring eyes. Kiba ran over to take Neji from Naruto's arms. Choji, he needs help. No, said Naruto keeping his eyes on Neji's face as he passed his limp form to Kiba. Hurry and take him to Konoha and tell the Hokage. Go with Akamaru now. Both man and dog gave Naruto an uncertain look, but did as they were told, leaving the camp on an arrow's path back home. Red, demonic chakra began to whip around Naruto as he glared fiercely at Sasuke's brother. The very air around Naruto swirled wildly and the mercenaries who had remained to watch what Itachi would do to the Leaf Ninja all shielded their eyes in the gale. Choji was finally up onto his feet again and grinned viciously with expectation. Kick his, Naruto, he cheered. You ready to die again? Naruto asked ominously. Itachi seemed unaffected by the display. You disappoint me, Naruto-kun, he said placidly. After all I did to arrange this little reunion for you. With that a second person emerged from the blue tent. A petite and young-looking woman walked calmly to stand a few paces behind the Uchiha. Her kimono was pale lavender, sashed with a violet shade that matched the color of her large doe-like eyes. Her pale round face was framed with short silvery blonde hair that lay just above the shoulders. Choji thought she was pretty in the way a child's doll might be seen to be, yet her manner was as frozen and lifeless as that of Itachi. What he saw next though caused him to break out in a cold sweat. Looking at back Naruto, he saw something he never thought he'd see in the most powerful ninja he knew. Naruto looked afraid. Setsuko, the blonde nin said looking shaken. Arashi Setsuko. Itachi's mouth twitched as the ghost of a smile hinted at his lips. I'm so glad you remembered her. As Itachi spoke, some of the mercenaries who had remained to watch started to move in closer. Their confidence rose as Itachi and Setsuko finally seemed to have an advantage over the Leaf Nins. Itachi's eyes flicked to the side in annoyance. Setsuko, he asked the pale Kunoichi, please tidy up this place. This trash has outlived their usefulness. No, screamed Naruto. The flowing sleeves of Setsuko's robe fluttered as her hands rose above her head. In the swift movement dozens of hooked senbon, throwing needles, flew to pierce and snare the rabble surrounding them. Each senbon was attached to a gossamer steel thread she had looped to her fingers. Her voice sounded like a small child's as her victims barely had time to start struggling. Shin. Electricity flowed from Setsuko's fingers charging along the metallic threads. Cries of alarm and fear were cut short, replaced with a greasy, sizzling hiss. The stench of cooked human flesh and burnt hair, caused the bile to rise in Naruto's throat. Choji, unable to control himself, retched noisily behind him. "We need to get out of here," Naruto realized desperately. "Choji, we're leaving," he yelled. "Earth Splash combo." "Okay," Choji said, wiping his mouth. He sprang into action. He leapt high in the air again using his Baika no Jutsu, multi-size, while Naruto's hands flashed with seals, carefully timing his jutsu's release with Choji's landing. Doden Sokuryusha, Earth-type skill, instant quicksand. The massive Chunin's impact caused a shockwave effect on the liquefied ground. Itachi and Setsuko were forced to spring to the tops of tent poles to avoid the splashing earth. The ground flowed like raging water only to harden again, but moments after it surged forth. The ninja landed back on the ground and watched crossed a hellish scene of cooked bodies and twisted earth as Naruto and Choji made their escape into the trees. "I didn't think he would run," said Setsuko quietly. "It doesn't matter," Itachi replied. "We've accomplished our part, now Orochimaru needs to keep his side of the bargain." As Itachi and Setsuko disappeared, the tendrils of nin smoke marking their departure drifted lazily over the silent and dread landscape. Kakashi felt he had been squeezed like an orange by the time he left Tsunade's office later that afternoon. She had wanted to know every tiny detail of his trip. He silently congratulated himself on his self-restraint. He had been very tempted to include telling her when and where he went to the bathroom too, just so she got the full picture. She doesn't have the sense of humor for details like that right now, he thought. The side trip to Tanza comment was a joke, but it had taken 10 minutes to convince her of that. Just because Tanza was a nearby resort famous for its casinos and red light district did not mean Hatake Kakashi had no self-control. He had some, which he used sparingly for special occasions. Besides, those types of things bored him quickly. "If I knew I was going to get grilled like that though I would have actually made the visit," he mused. Kakashi really missed Sandaime at times like these. The third's easygoing manner and fatherly presence made him feel that no matter how bad things got it would all turn out alright somehow. Tsunade was a smart woman, descended from Yondaime, a brilliant, powerful ninja in her own right, but where Sarutobi seemed settled, more able to take it, she seemed less sure of herself, almost brittle. "The Hokage has her reasons. I guess we all do," Kakashi reflected, but such thoughts got him down and depressed. He didn't like that. He laughed at himself. "This is what happens when I don't have my book for 4 days." Since he was tired, hungry, bored and without read material, the Scarecrow Nin decided now was a perfect time to do some intensive training. He moved at top speed along the rooftops of Konoha, making good time towards the Hokage monument where his favorite pick of training spots was hidden. Near the top of the mountain's carved face was small cave well hidden from the view looking up. It led to a tunnel going straight through the mountain under the observation fort at the summit, the other side of which led into a deep bowl-like arena. It was said that it had been in existence since the founding of the village, if not even earlier than that. This was a place different from the public stadium used for village meetings and the Chunin exhibitions. In fact, no more than a dozen shinobi would ever have need to be in here at any one time. That time being one of the most important, vital events that occurred in Konoha, the Junin exam. In certain ways the Junin trials were the exact opposite of the Chunin. The Chunin exam showed the village's strength to world, the vital, young talent it possessed, but the Junin exam was a secret affair where a village's elite ninja would quietly induct another into their ranks. Many things other than strength were tested there, and it was only by being sponsored by a Junin that one could even be considered for the promotion. Like Chunin, death was rare, but not unheard of in this set of trials as well. When Kakashi arrived he was very surprised to find the testing ground already had an occupant. Looking down at the center he immediately recognized a former pupil of his. Haruno Sakura was there, moving through a form of a taijutsu style he quickly realized he hadn't seen before. The strikes and kicks seemed standard, but other movements looked soft-handed and weak. They would almost be a wasted effort in a real fight. He jumped down to the arena floor and Sakura, noting his arrival, abruptly ended her practice. She greeted him looking very self-conscious. "Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here?" she asked nervously. Kakashi put his hands in his pockets and strolled over to her. "Konnichiwa, Sakura. Last time I checked this was a Junin training area." Sakura pushed her hands behind her back and blinked a few times in fake shock. "Really, sensei? I had no idea, komenasai," she said. Kakashi had to smile. Even all grown-up Sakura was still one of the worst liars he'd ever met. She would only be here because what she was practicing was either dangerous or something she didn't want others to see. It piqued his curiosity. No worries, I was coming up to do some training myself," he told her gently. "You were working on taijutsu, right? Did you need a sparring partner?" Sakura's surprised look became genuine. She said hastily, "No, arigato, sensei. What I was working on isn't ready yet for that." Sakura paused. Looking away she finished, "And it wouldn't work well against a Sharingan user." Kakashi studied her briefly. No longer a child, this Sakura still had a heart that was as clear and delicate as glass. "Why do you still torture yourself with thoughts of him, Sakura?" he wondered to himself. It had seemed like a simple crush to him at first, but he soon realized how much Sakura had loved Sasuke. It was a sentiment she had kept for so long and with so little in return. Kakashi wasn't sure whether he was lucky or ill-fated, but he had never pursued someone's love so desperately the way she had. Although, he reminded himself, a much younger, much more foolish scarecrow had once, like Sasuke, been on the receiving end of that same tragic sort of love. He took his hands out of his pockets and adjusted his stance to a more ready position. "Come on, I won't use my eye. Just remember to take it easy on me, okay?" Kakashi's supportive gesture gave her confidence and Sakura perked up. "Okay, you asked for it, Ikuyo," she yelled. Sakura sprung back a pace and her hands flew through a bunch of seals in an adept motion. Kakashi watched closely. She's using other jutsu with the fighting technique, he thought. Her seals started in succession for Bushin no Jutsu, but she had added 3 more seals at the end of it, including a Hitsuji, or sheep seal. Many advanced genjutsu ended with that sign. His excitement rose as he anticipated seeing something new. Given he was the infamous copy ninja, that didn't happen too often. 2 identical images of Sakura appeared to either side of her and then moved to together, overlapping her true form. With normal eyes she appeared to have done nothing special to herself. Kakashi's hands itched to push his forehead protector up to see more. Sakura charged forward and started throwing attacks at the Junin. He dodged her easily, watching the moves. Sakura's speed has improved greatly, still nothing I can't handle though, he thought. Kakashi was almost disappointed. The Junin knew there was more to it. Sakura, however, was visibly enjoying herself, her emerald eyes flashed with excitement. It was at that moment he realized how beautiful a woman Sakura had become. Watching the fiery kunoichi spar him, a rare flash of memories enter his mind. In almost another lifetime, he had practiced with another woman with that same, dazzling expression. Her eyes were blue, he recalled. Kakashi decided to counter her finally. Blocking a spinning fist, he went to wrap his hand around her arrested forearm when it seemed to melt through the flesh. Genjutsu. But how? A leg appeared as the illusion faded to reveal a powerful attack coming from a real Sakura. The Junin took a solid kick to the chest and felt himself flying backwards in the air. He didn't bother to correct his fall as he felt the ground rise up to meet him. It was softer than he remembered. His mind was elsewhere, still wrestling with the uninvited images that had surfaced. Kakashi was sure he'd buried these feelings years ago, but he knew that was just a fool's blindness. The human mind didn't work that way, and avoiding human contact could only suppress so much pain. He could still recall the sound of her voice. It was funny, she'd always seemed to be screaming at him. "Get up, Kakashi," her words echoing in his memory, "or that idiot Obito will get the bells from Sensei first." We need to stick together. Don't worry now, I have a plan. It hurt to remember that he'd forgotten it all. Fortunately, another woman's voice dragged him back to the present. Kakashi-sensei, Daijobu? Asked Sakura above him with concern. The silver-haired Junin sighed and pulled himself to a sitting position. Ma, I'm fine, he said, holding out a hand to his former pupil so she could help him up. Dusting himself off a little he asked, can I see how you did it now? Sakura nodded hesitantly, and while he adjusted his forehead protector, she remolded her chakra into the jutsu. Sharingan. Kakashi watched the chakra flow of the Bushins overlap Sakura's true form, and as he moved quickly to strike at her again he observed something very surprising. The Bushin moved, making it appear Sakura used a standard forearm block to guard the attack, but through his spinning eye he saw the reality of the counter. Sakura's real hand, hidden by illusion, twisted upward, and with an open palm she met his fist with only 2 fingers. Both Kakashi's eyes widened in astonishment at what happened next. A small release of chakra came from her fingers, interrupting his attack like a solid wall. She moved with lightning speed to recoil and punch at him. This time he caught her true blow with his other hand. They stopped, releasing each other quickly. Sakura examined her feet while Kakashi stood in stunned silence. That was a Jiyuken move, wasn't it? He said finally. Sakura kept looking at her feet, but bobbed her head in affirmation. I can only using the hand blocking technique, she said softly. The internal attacks require the ability to see chakra holes, but the basic blocks only need you to express chakra from your fingertips. A mix of emotions flooded through the elder ninja. He knew Sakura's control was exceptional at a young age, but this was still genius on her part. Pride gave way quickly to concern. Blocking with chakra expressed from the fingers was not something the Hyuga clan could do alone. The Hokage and other high-level ninja could perform similar techniques as well, but style of Sakura's block was clearly Hyuga, which meant forbidden to non-clan members. More questions had to be asked, and her need to hide the training led him to the answers. Sakura, Kakashi began carefully. This is a wonderful technique, I'm very proud of you, but Hinata-san could get in trouble for this, you understand? Sensei, she said slowly looking up. It wasn't Hinata. Neji helped me learn the Jiyuken defense. Kakashi exhaled loudly through his mask. He never expected that one. Neji had been a challenging student for Guy, and while he developed into a strong chunin for the village, he still had a reputation as a bit of a hardass. Hiyashi's adoption last year didn't help matters any from what he understood. Neji's not as tough as everyone thinks he is, Sakura said in an oddly defensive tone. He can be really sweet, and he cares a lot about being honest and honorable. He's very passionate under that shell of his. Her serious mood faded like a turning breeze, and she gazed up at him with an affectionate smile. We all have something we keep hidden in our hearts, don't we, Kakashi-sensei? The older nin put a hand to the back of his head and laughed awkwardly in response. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura. Their abashed moment was brought to a close by a new visitor. Hyuga Hinata appeared in a puff of nin smoke next to them. She was a portrait of anxiety as she looked at them both. Sakura, she said, Naruto's team got back from their mission early this morning, but Neji had to be rushed to the hospital. Kiba said he's injured badly and that only the Hokage can help him. The pink-haired nin's face paled. Why don't you go see him now, Sakura? Said Kakashi, we were finished here anyway. Sakura turned to him and with a quick nod, disappeared, followed by Hinata. Kakashi sighed. That was not the stress-relieving physical exertion he'd been planning. Guess I'll do the next best thing and go have a drink, he decided as he readied to leave. At least that's uncomplicated. It was one of those golden, peaceful moments. Shikamaru soaked lazily in his bathtub, enjoying the luxury of the quiet. The steaming hot water had done its job well, and the pain from his healing bruised ribs had faded from wincing to hardly noticeable. Laying back into the water, he submerged himself past even his ears till nothing but his face broke the surface. He could almost float without touching the sides or bottom. Getting this bigger tub was one of Ino's of the best ideas ever, he thought contentedly. Sure, there were a couple minor little problems. The bathroom door could only open inward about 15 inches before smacking in the tub's corner, and so what if he now had to stand in the tub to use the sink? It was all good. Heck, Choji didn't even need to be reminded to go before he stopped over anymore, and as long as he and Ino stayed skinny they were completely safe. He zoned for a bit before the things that had been bothering him gnawed to the surface. The last mission was by definition a success. They had scouted the ruins, turned back the enemy and finally returned with an artifact that the Hokage had said was immensely dangerous and powerful in the wrong hands, yet everything felt wrong. What resemblance did he mean? Shikamaru said to the ceiling. He seriously hoped for a response. Kabuto obviously meant that Sasuke resembled someone, but whom? Certainly not his older brother. He could clearly remember the day it was announced Uchiha Itachi was dead. The Hokage had hand-chosen a team of 4 people to capture the S-class criminal. She had unexpectedly elected to go herself and days later returned with a badly injured and unconscious Naruto. Immediately assembling the team captains, she told them that Jiraiya had gone back to Mayuboku after the battle. With a pained expression she then asked for volunteers to gather the body of their final team member who'd fallen in battle. Shikamaru still remembered how calm Rock Lee had been when he asked to be sent along. After all, Maeda Guy had been his sensei and role model. Kakashi had also been vehement that he go pick up the remains as well. Everyone had been shaken by the news. Guy was so strong, a pillar among the Junin. Even though he was a little peculiar, it didn't matter because he was one of those people who made you feel safe just by being there. The Hokage had said that Itachi's body was destroyed when he was killed. She hinted at some vast super jutsu of destruction and no one had questioned it. Well, Kakashi had, but Tsunade shut him up pretty quick about it. Naruto had said he couldn't remember a thing when he woke up either. So either Sasuke's got another brother or… Shikamaru didn't like this line of thought at all. He wasn't even sure what it would mean for the village. He sat up and pulled his knees towards his chest just as the door to his bathroom pushed open. Shikamaru caught the scent of a familiar lavender perfume as Ino squeezed around the door to plop inelegantly down on his toilet cover. "Woo, good landing," she said, laughing at herself. As he turned his head to look at her, she planted a kiss lightly on his cheek. "Hey sweetie, what's up?" she asked. Shikamaru felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Every time he was gone on a long mission, returning to Ino was like seeing her again for the first time. "Nothing much, just the same long pointless missions," he said dismissively. Bringing up his theory that the Hokage had been lying to the village for the past 3 years was not someplace he wanted to go right now. "How was the field trip?" he asked. Ino grabbed the soap from the dish and started to wash his back. "Oh, it was fun," she said. "We went out to the pond with that great little waterfall just behind the Hokage mountain. Iruka sent us out to do some underwater concealment, which a lot of the younger ones have problems." He nodded. A ninja should always avoid using jutsu for concealment if possible. Spending chakra unnecessarily could jeopardize one's ability to complete a mission. It was important that shinobi children pick up those skills as early as possible. She grabbed a rag from the tubside. "I was worried about how to manage it all until Iruka-sensei said Sasuke could come too." Shikamaru, who had been resting his chin comfortable on his knees, reacted to that statement. He half twisted around to look at her, his bare skin squeaking against the wet porcelain. "Sasuke went too," he said, suddenly alarmed and half angry. Ino gave him a level look. "Yes, jealous boy, Sasuke went too. He can hold his breath longer than I can and they listen better when he teaches." She continued to rinse his back while talking. "I thought it odd too, but Iruka-sensei said he okayed with Tsunade and kids loved it." Sasuke didn't seem fazed by it either. She was silent for a moment. "Of course," she continued, "I've come to expect these little surprises with Tsunade and it explains this." OWW, Ino. Shikamaru almost levitated out of the tub as pain shot through him. Ino had poked him on the side where his bruises were. He turned to say more when he caught the menace in her expression. Honestly, Ino said to him, near smoldering, how big of an idiot does the woman think I am? Shikamaru tried to calm her down. She just doesn't want you to worry, he began, before starting to cringe at the sight of her. He had this bad habit of saying the wrong thing. If I have only one right as a woman in this damn village, Shikamaru, she said heatedly, it's the right to worry about the ninja I'm in love with. Ino slapped the rag down on the side of the tub and reached for the shampoo. Shikamaru felt the color rising in his face as he turned back around meekly to let her wash his hair. Her fingers were far from gentle as she dug into his head, but he was too afraid to tell her. The bald patches will grow back, he tried to assure himself. Mom always swore my hair grew like a weed. After a while Ino had taken out most of her frustration on Shikamaru's poor scalp. She started to feel bad. Ino was never able to stay angry with him. It was key factor in the success of their relationship, she surmised. Maybe for all couples. You complain and complain about her. She started ending their forced silence. But did you ever notice the moment when I say something about Tsunade you turn around and begin to defend her? Now that you mention it I do, but I'm kind of dumb, so I always say the wrong things, he said playfully. Ino tilted his head back and placed a kiss on his forehead. I know. It's a sad. I'm so shallow that I only go after the guys with looks not brains, she teased back while getting up to leave. Rinse and get out of there. It's starting to get cold. Shikamaru slid back into the water and washed the shampoo out. He was so glad she was finally here. Here with him. He didn't want to think about anything else for tonight at least. Tomorrow with its intrigue and unpleasantness would come all too soon anyway. He floated again for a brief moment to cleanse his mind before sitting up. The water really is starting to lose its heat, he thought. Hearing the door shut again, he assumed she had come back in. Hey Ino, hand me. Ino. Shikamaru had caught glimpse of her that sent him spinning around to the other end of tub. Ino stood there before him in all her glory, not a stitch of clothing to be found. She smiled at him seductively while her fingers combed through her loose, flowing blonde hair. Pulling a strand of it over her shoulder, she let it trail lazily down between her perfect round. Shikamaru was not finding a problem with the water temperature at this point. It also occurred to him his mouth was open. Ino took a step slowly into the tub. I like you like this, she purred, with you hair down, acting all coy, like a trapped deer, creeping up to him, she let her lips brush lightly against his. It makes me feel all predatory. She kissed him fully this time and soon Shikamaru's mouth met hers eagerly. Ino let out a small squeal of delight as he took her in his arms. Only a soft splash and the occasional moan came out of bathroom. After a hard mission the least she thought she could do was help keep her boyfriend's bath warm. Sakura and Hinata burst through the doors of the hospital and made a beeline through the waiting area to the nurse's station. The place seemed deserted, but an ammonia smell hinted at a janitor's recent passage. They followed the long stretch of green and brown carpet that led from the door to the check-in desk. Two young women in clean white uniforms staffed it. As Sakura strode up to the desk they were innocently wiping their mouths of crumbs as one of them quickly hid a cookie tin in a desk drawer. Before the pink-haired girl could utter a sound the closest nurse began speaking to them in an unpleasant droning voice. I'm sorry ladies, visitor's hours are over. Unless you are immediate family I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Hinata stopped dead in her tracks, but Sakura grabbed her arm and pulled her the last couple of feet to the counter. We are family, she said. Hinata's brother is here and we've just found out about his condition. Sakura knew it was stretching the truth, but she wasn't leaving cause some closet-eating candy striper said so. The two attendants exchanged unconvinced glances but the other nurse nodded and with a sigh the closest one started to flip through the card file on her desk. Name, she asked. Hyuga Neji. Hinata said barely above a whisper. The woman stopped flipping and closed the file with a quick snap. I'm sorry, she said with a satisfied smile. Neji-sama isn't taking any visitors. Domo, said Hinata with a small bow. She turned meekly to leave, avoiding Sakura's gaze, but before she could take a step the other woman had grabbed her by the shoulders and spun her back around. And why isn't Neji taking visitors? Said Sakura asked, slamming her hands down on the countertop. She was beginning to get really annoyed. First nurse just stared blandly at her, while her partner stood up. Listen, said the other woman, now speaking for the first time, I don't know who you two Chunin are, but Neji-sama is in with the Hokage right now. She crossed her arms, continuing, if you don't understand what that means, perhaps we can find some Anbu to explain that to you. Sakura smiled sweetly, and with the nurses watching on, she slowly raised her right arm and extended out to her side. When her hand became level with her shoulder, she made a quick, loud snap with her fingers. Sakura turned down the hall towards the stairs, pulling Hinata along with her. The dark-haired girl glanced back behind them to see the nurses seemingly frozen with void looks on their faces. Genjutsu, how did you? She began. Simple, said Sakura. When I snapped my fingers, I made a seal with my other hand. Right now those two are watching us leave out the front door in a huff. She had learned very early in her genjutsu training from Kakashi-sensei that basic deceptions are often the best way to fool opponents. If your adversary knows what your intentions are, then it doesn't matter how much chakra you expend, the illusion will still fail all the same. Hinata's eyes grew with astonishment. You can do one-handed seals? Only with some basic jutsu. Sakura replied as they climbed steps. I saw a very talented boy in Wave Country do it when I was a genin. That was also when she realized how deeply she was in love with a certain dark-eyed teammate, she thought ruefully. They peeked through the doors going into the second-floor hall. Sakura nodded to Hinata, who performed the seals for the Byakugan, and searched down the corridor with her eyes. She withdrew her jutsu before shaking her head. What about the Anbu? She asked Sakura as they continued moving up to next floor. I figured we would deal with that when we met one, Sakura said, but I don't think there are any here, which is odd. The Hokage didn't normally run around without an escort, particularly at night. It made her think something very bad had happened, but what exactly she couldn't fathom. Hinata recognized Neji's name scribbled on a chart when they checked on the 5th floor. The two women walked silently down the long hall to where his room lay. Oddly, the floor seemed mostly vacant as they approached his suite. Sakura wondered whether the Hokage had him moved up here for a reason. Getting close, they could clearly hear voices raised in some sort of argument. Sakura recognized it as Naruto and the Hokage. Hesitating to enter the room in mid-yell, she and Hinata paused to listen. I'm telling you, it was Setsuko. She heard him say. I don't forget psychopathic albino chicks who have almost killed me. Why would they be together though? Came Tsunade's voice. I don't know, said Naruto. One of them wants dissect me, the other turn me into teriyaki. You still haven't explained what he's doing. The room became silent as Naruto's plaintive response was abruptly cut off. Sakura looked at an anxious Hinata and got ready to knock when the Hokage spoke. Come in, Sakura. Trying not to blush with embarrassment, Sakura entered the room with Hinata following at her heels. The room was wide and long, with Hokage seated next the hospital bed with Naruto leaning against the opposite wall, his arms folded tight across his chest. He had his head down and looked extremely angry with his feet for some reason. Ah, and Hinata too, said Tsunade. The Hokage seemed both relieved and annoyed at the same. Sakura felt the palpable tension in the room and wondered idly if she would start sweating. Well, she asked, what did you two hear? Well, stammered Sakura. Hinata cut her off quickly. She hated to be rude to her friend, but Sakura had a habit of making things overcomplicated when they didn't need to be. She said, Ano, we just came to the door when we heard Naruto-kun mention a person named Setsuko. Her pale eyes glanced briefly in concern at him. Also about him being dissected and something about food. Naruto seemed to ignore the comments, but his arms flexed with strain as he folded arms even tighter. If they were still Genin, Sakura would have swore he was about to throw a tantrum. The Hokage's eyes locked on the dark-haired Kunoichi's. It was a moment that seemed hours. Nothing else, she asked unblinking. That was all, Hokage-sama, said Hinata firmly. Sakura nodded behind her teammate in sincere agreement. Tsunade let out a breath that seemed almost a sigh of relief. I'm feeling very tired all of the sudden, she said pleasantly in a magical turnaround of mood. I guess I should go get some beauty sleep and let you girls check up on our patient over here. Neji-kun's all better now and, she said turning to look down at his peaceful form, very awake. The corners of his mouth turned up slyly as he opened his eyes. You knew, he said sounding amused. The Hokage walked casually to the door and turned to take them all in gaze. Naruto, you, Neji and I will continue our talk as soon as he's discharged. Good night, everyone. They were as still as statues as they watched Tsunade's departure. They remained as such while door swung to close with an almost agonizing slowness. Its latch catching reluctantly making the space private once again. 4 pairs of eyes met and broke away, shifting in an instant to a face they felt comfort in seeing. Sakura moved to sit on the edge of the bed beside Neji, her hand creeping gently into his, while Hinata joined Naruto leaning against the wall. She spoke to him softly, laying a hand on his arm. Her touch seemed to calm him a little, reversing his transformation into a human knot. Let's go outside, Hinata, Naruto said. This place has a lot of hot air in it right now and smells like old people. He almost ran out of the room, ripping the door open and striding away with Hinata moving to follow. Before she could clear the entranceway, her brother stopped her to address some family business. Hinata-san, said Neji, who had long ago dropped the honorific when speaking to her. We will need to talk about this soon. A flash of something between fear and anger, yet very close to pain, washed over Hinata's face as she responded. Hi. Her footsteps faded quickly into the hall's echo, leaving the remaining occupants in the returning silence. Damn Neji, thought Sakura watching them leave. Why can't he just let Hinata be happy? She looked down at him with an angry expression, but he was studying her hands as he held them. She tried to shrug him off, but he held on. Taking his left hand, he traced lightly over a thin, pink scar on her forearm. This one is new, he said softly. It's just a scratch, she said. I got it returning from Nagayama while carrying someone who was injured. You should tell Shikamaru to be more careful, said Neji wryly. Bringing her hand to his lips, he kissed it lightly. It changes nothing. Saying Neji had an eye for detail was a bit of an understatement. While they were dating, Sakura found that he noticed every little change in appearance she made, from accessories to a new outfit, even a trim of her hair. It had almost made her even more obsessed, if that was possible, with never getting a zit. Once she teased him that he would fall out of love with her when she became a scarred and leathery old kunoichi. It was funny, remembering his response still made her feel a little flustered. Flawless beauty like yours doesn't change with time, he said. Neji was very good at talking too. She had to remind herself how dangerous it was to let him keep talking. Sakura noticed how his eyes seemed to glow in the soft moonlight that came through the window at his bedside. This isn't what I wanted to happen, thought Sakura. I was concerned for him. Neji looked just fine, a lot better than fine actually. Why weren't there more lights on in this place? I should leave, she said aloud. You were worried about me, he stated with a pleased smile. Sakura felt her cheeks reddening. She turned her head away, feeling self-conscious. The words stumbling from mouth. Of course, I was, she said. I have other places to be right now, she thought. She needed to say goodbye politely and go. As she felt him shift a little on the bed, Sakura turned back to look at him. Neji was sitting up and his face was now very close to hers, and getting closer. She was caught off guard. Before Sakura could say anything, his lips met hers hungrily, driving away her ability to speak. She put her hands on his shoulders to shove him away, but instead of pushing, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt to hang on. She closed her eyes and felt herself give into his embrace. Neji's hands wrapped smoothly around her waist as he drew her closer in his arms. Sakura hadn't realized how badly she missed his affection. Over the past few months she hadn't been with anyone else and certainly hadn't let anyone, even friends, get too close. Focusing on missions and training, she felt that after ending it with him she had needed a break. She knew all along that pretending you can't feel the pain doesn't make it disappear. The kiss was bittersweet. Sakura broke away. "Neji," she gasped, sounding out of breath. Neji's mouth formed a roguish little smile as he lay back down. "The nurse doesn't come back until after 10 o'clock, he told her. Want to stay and tuck me in?" "I can't believe you," said Sakura, exasperated. "You were just healed from a serious injury. What happened to you, by the way?" She had to change the subject. Neji's face became serious and he sat up again. It was all a deception, however, as he moved in again to steal another kiss. Sakura was ready for him this time and pushed him back quickly, this time with an added groan of frustration. Neji laughed, but behaved himself. "Sorry, I can't tell you," he said, "top secret." Sakura wasn't sure if he was hiding something or still playing around, but she really did need to leave. She tried to get up, but Neji held on to her hands. "Come on, stay, I promise I'll be good," he said sincerely to her. "Please, stay." Sakura extracted her hands and stood turning to face the bed. "I can't, Neji. It's Thursday night," she said, looking tiredly at him. She felt like crying, but she was done with tears when it came to him. A puzzled look appeared on Neji's face, but he came to the answer quickly without needing to ask the question. The warmth drained from his expression, replaced by traces of steel seen clearly in his eyes. He put his hands behind his head and stared up at the ceiling. "I forgot about your charity case," he said coldly. He remembered that this was the night of the week where she went over Uchiha Sasuke's house to have dinner. Sakura didn't seem to register his response and started to leave towards the door. Neji could feel the anger building up and fought the urge to grit his teeth. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Sakura," he yelled at her back. Sakura paused before opening the door and spoke without facing him. "We all have to live with our mistakes, Neji," she said, "even you and me." Neji shut his eyes tightly and waited, listening for her departure. Remaining still, he continued to listen as the sudden harsh silence that had threaded the evening's events together returned to the room. He didn't understand until that very moment how much he hated Uchiha. The thought of losing her to him was more painfully than the hundreds of imagined stabs his twisted brother had made him experience with the Sharingan, a lot worse. As he escaped into sleep, Neji offered himself one small comfort. "Still," he thought, "she did kiss me back. Can I have another, please?" asked Haruka politely, waving at the bartender. The man smiled and came over to refresh the young sensei's drink. "You don't normally go this many rounds before dinner. Everything all right, sensei?" he asked amiably. Haruka placed a hand behind his head and grinned. "I know, I just had a rough day. I'll be ordering food in a little bit." The man nodded in understanding and moved back down the long stretch of bar to serve other customers and give Haruka the privacy he appeared to crave. Haruka was a regular visitor to this restaurant. It was nice, affordable, and sat on a corner only a couple of blocks from his apartment, which made it very convenient. For the past few years, every time payday rolled around, Haruka had gotten into the habit of treating himself to dinner here. However, he rarely had guests with him. It was almost as if solitude was a ritual part of the meal. The chef, a loud happy fellow, would always joke with him that they were going to add a dolphin roll to menu in his honor. Haruka would also laugh and always say he would be very honored as long as they didn't use real dolphin. The Chunin stared into his drink for a long while. His stare fixed, watching the ice fade slowly, dissolving into the pale liquid, dying with that tiny squeaky crunching sound as it decayed to its watery form. The cold seeped through the sweating glass and robbed his fingers of warmth. He slipped into oblivion as his thoughts flew elsewhere. The events of his day's end replayed endlessly. The sequence unchangeable despite his desire to see it otherwise. Time was like painting with watercolors in a way. Once you moved on from your yellows to your reds, you couldn't go back. Uruka realized mist painting, it was a nice distraction sometimes. What does that boy live for now? He thought. Today was his weekly review with his charge, Uchiha Sasuke. The 18-year-old who was still a mystery to Uruka even after dozens of hours of observation. It was delusional on his part, but Uruka still liked to think of himself as Sasuke's teacher. He knew of course it was only because the other more appropriate labels had left a sour taste in his mouth. Anyone else would have used the right words. Without hesitation they would have called him his parole officer or even worse, his warden. It wasn't anyone's fault. The Hokage had made perhaps the only decision she could once Sasuke was brought back. In a trial of disaffected calculation, Uruka ran through the alternatives that were all considered back then. Memories, which even 3 years later still tickled his gag reflex in a wave of nausea. Orochimaru's interest in him was dangerous, they said, he should be eliminated, too valuable, he could be forced to reproduce, have his eyes extracted, it's been done before, but with Itachi gone, perhaps, then, all the Uchiha should be. Uruka shuddered involuntarily, the remains of ice tinkling in his glass marking the tremors. After much deliberation the decision was finally made to keep Sasuke alive and intact. Along with it came a decree that last of the Uchiha could not leave Konohagakure upon pain of death. It was an order sealed to all the adults of the village as only the Leaf's dirtiest little secrets were. I'm being too negative, Uruka thought. The Hokage wouldn't have let those dire things happen unless it was unavoidable, and they had been. Over time Sasuke was relieved of house arrest and allowed to help in teaching at the academy under his supervision. Ino and Rock Lee had helped out and soon Sasuke's life was given some semblance of normalcy. To everyone's surprise he had seemed to embrace it, but only to a point. Uruka was still haunted by the end of today's conversation. Did you enjoy the field trip with Ino and the children, Sasuke? He had asked. I enjoy the kids a lot, Uruka-sensei, responded Sasuke. Though he'd grown accustomed to his manner, Uruka was still amazed at differences in Sasuke the child versus Sasuke the young man. His meek, polite manner rivaled Hyuga Hinata's. They all look up to you, Sasuke-kun, Uruka told him. It's an important obligation being a teacher to academy students because you become their role model, their measure of what growing up means. Hi, sensei. I'm sorry to lecture you, Uruka had apologized. I'm sure you were happy to be given permission to go outside the village walls. You see, I told you that as you demonstrate your responsibility and good character the Hokage would give you more freedom. Uruka took a long swallow from his glass and let the burning sensation clear the catch building in his throat. Sasuke had looked at him then with that pleasant, kind smile of his. It was an expression that seemed to brighten his whole face, the one that made all the little girls swoon and the little boys grin sheepishly. His words had been a mockery of that smile. A cage is still a cage, Uruka-sensei, even if you can't see the bars, he had said. A hand placed on his shoulder roused Uruka from his worrisome stupor. Drinking alone, Uruka, came a slightly smoky, feminine voice beside his ear. Uruka turned in surprise to find Yuichi Kurenai smiling at him. Ah, Kurenai-san, konbanwa. She sat on the stool next to him. So formal. Just call me Kurenai. The fact we are both willing to talk to Anko in public makes us more than acquaintances. Her deep red eyes filled with mischief at the jab. Uruka's mouth twisted out its smile. Anko-san, ah, is she joining you? Like a summoning, the poor fellow caught hearty slap on the back as the other woman draped herself on his other side. How's it hanging, Uruka-kun? Got a hot date lined up? Uruka felt the sweat start form on his forehead. Hello Anko-san. Ano, No, I was just about to treat myself to a nice sushi dinner after a long week. Kurenai briefly eyed the glass in his hand before leaning an elbow on the bar to look at them both. She looked up suspiciously at him, like he was hiding something. Why don't you join us? She offered brightly. We all had the day off, so we went over to Tanza. There Asuma lost a bet to Anko on a dog race, so we came here to collect on dinner. Iruka was a little more aware of his surroundings now that he'd been attacked by the two women. They all looked over towards the door expectantly before it opened. Asuma Sarutobi entered, raising his hand with friendly wave, followed by another gentleman. When Iruka spied the tuft of silvery hair over Asuma's shoulder, he could barely suppress a groan. He did not need to deal with that guy tonight. Oi, Anko, Asuma said, you invited Iruka too. Am I treating half the village? Anko leaned over Iruka's back, almost pulling him off the stool to stick her tongue out at the tall Junin sensei. The academy sensei gripped the bar for dear life. Don't be stingy, Asuma. You lost fair and square, yelled Anko. If it's a problem, I'm happy to leave, said Iruka, still with a death grip on the counter. Kurenai laid a hand on his arm and shook her head in apology at the misunderstanding. Asuma quickly corrected, No, Iruka, I'm sorry to be rude. I was just teasing Anko. He jerked a thumb at Kakashi next to him with a wry grin. Fair and square. This one told me the race was a sure thing, and instead I nearly lost my shirt. For the first time, Iruka allowed himself to look at Kakashi. The masked nin looked almost small next to the towering Asuma, yet his dull, bored-looking expression didn't alter as Iruka stared at him. The Chunin relaxed a little. Oh good, he thought, he's not acting all weird, maybe this won't be so bad. With everyone's attention turned to him, Kakashi dug his hands his pockets and shrugged noncommittally. I put Pakun in the race, he said, to drive up the stakes. Because he's little and doesn't look very fast, but well, he's been fighting off a cold, and they had some pretty fast dogs there. His shameless grin seeped through his mask. I guess we weren't the only ones with a ringer in there. Serves you both right, said Kurenai with laugh very much like her voice, low and charming. She stood and turned toward the hostess as she approached them. The woman bowed. Your private table is ready, ma'am. The party moved to follow her as she led them to the far side of the restaurant and back along a short hallway. Sliding open a door that blended almost seamlessly with the wall, the hostess moved aside, inviting them to be seated in the small dining room. Anko pushed forward to get her first choice. Come on, Iruka, she said, dragging him along with her, sit next to me. Iruka stumbled over the low table and slid in with her, rubbing the shin he abused as she pulled him down. Since I'm a lefty when I eat, offered Kakashi, taking the opposite side from them, I'll sit on this side. Kurenai sat down neatly to Iruka's other side and Asuma filled in next to Kakashi. Once they were situated, a waitress came up to ask if they were comfortable and to tell them the specials for the evening. As the server finished, Kurenai looked around the table. It all sounds good. What should we get? She asked. Well, since I'm treating, said Asuma, I want some bulgogi. Bulgogi equals Korean BBQ. You're no fun, you always get the same thing, pouted Anko. Iruka, what did you want? Iruka rubbed his neck in a reflex, still slightly uncomfortable with the unexpected situation of dining with 4 Junin. The barbecued eel is very good here. The eel sounded good to me too, said Kakashi. Iruka smiled at him, relieved someone shared his tastes, then quickly averted his gaze to look at Anko as he felt a blush rising up. Why am I blushing? The Chunin thought. I'm being ridiculous. Kakashi-san has probably forgotten about the prank he pulled already. Kurenai gave the waitress the full order once they all agreed. The young lady bowed and asked, would you like anything to drink, ma'am? Asuma perked up. I'll have a beer, and also we'll need an ashtray, he pointing at the cigarette he was about to light. I'd like, began Kakashi. Before he could finish his speech was arrested when Anko placed her hand over his mask. Who cares what you want, Kakashi? She said obnoxiously. What do you want to have, Iruka? she asked sweetly. Uruka blinked at her. It had been a while since he'd been exposed to Anko's disturbing mood swings. He knew deep down Anko was a very serious person, and given how Orochimaru had used her and tossed her away like trash when she was a 13-year-old genin, most ninja put up with her volatile behavior kindly. He also knew that she somehow blamed herself for the evil Sennin's creation of his atrocious jutsu which stole a person's body. It was her desire to keep living with the seal that had advanced his research to the next level. It showed others would too, others like Sasuke. Her crazy behavior and carefree outlook on life allowed her to fight against the darkness and depression she felt well up from such a past. She was a lot like Naruto in that way. Watching Kakashi's eyebrow arch in puzzlement as he looked at Anko's hand covering his mouth almost made Uruka burst out laughing. Trying to keep a straight face, Uruka answered, "I don't know, ah." "I know," interrupted Anko excitedly as she retrieved her hand from Kakashi's face. "Let's get sake. How about it, Kurenai? Come on." The other woman looked at her in dismay for a moment, but then assented. Hi, as long as it's not plum. Plum sake gives me issues." "Yay, everyone's getting sake." Cheered waitress bowed and glided away gracefully fill their order. As they waited, the four senior ninja all recounted tales of their day in Tanza to Uruka. Kurenai poked fun at Anko, explaining to Uruka what a challenge sharing an apartment with her was. Anko defended herself, of course, saying that at least she did her chores most of the time and that if Kurenai didn't like it she could move in with her boyfriend, the human chimney. The jab scored points as Kurenai and Asuma produced flustered looks. Their hush-hush relationship was about as secret as the Hokage's age. Kakashi pointed out the obvious, saying that he was sure the rent was cheaper with a roommate, and asked Asuma out of the blue if he would be interested in rooming with him. Both Anko and Kurenai laughed so hard they were crying. They teased that between the stench of old cigarette butts and Kakashi's ponderous collection of hentai manga strewn about the place, they'd never get anyone to visit them. Both men didn't seem that put off by the idea, who said they wanted visitors anyway. Uruka just listened for the most part. The Junin's camaraderie had started back when they all took their first genin assignments not so long ago, and it had gelled into a tight-knit group of friends. It was pretty rare to see a Junin have any true friends. Friends ended up being emotional liabilities to ninja, as death too often took them away from you. There was no training to prepare you for their loss, no jutsu to ease your pain as you buried them. These guys had beat those odds, and it was an atmosphere Uruka enjoyed being around. The sake and food arrived quickly and everyone dug in. Anko attacked the rice wine more than the food and seemed obsessed with Uruka's progress. "Come Uruka, drink with me," she yelled in his ear. Ha, sorry Anko, I had a head start on you, remember, I want to eat more first." Uruka went to grab some of the eel sushi he'd ordered when he noticed almost half the plate was gone. He grabbed a piece and watched the plate as he chewed to catch who the eel hog was. He pretended to look over at Asuma, who was talking, when he saw Kakashi's chopsticks dart out and snag a piece. "I'll finally get to see his face," Uruka thought. He learned soon that wouldn't be the case. Kakashi brought the sushi up just above his head, then in the fluid motion pulled his mask away from his face and tilted back to let the sushi drop in. The material snapped back in place lightly as the one-eye nin chewed contentedly. Kurenai leaned over to Uruka's ear as he gawked in astonishment at the process. "I see this is your first time witnessing Kakashi's garbage pail technique," she commented. Uruka nodded, still watching. "Well," she confided, "you're not going to see beneath his mask that way, but there are other ways to get him to expose himself." Kurenai's tone was completely scandalous. Uruka turned to her with an appalled look. "What do you mean by that?" he said to her. She smiled like a cat and pointed back to the table. "You'd better stay sharp or Kakashi's going to up all your eel." He was blushing again. He realized he hated that. He looked back and saw there were only 4 pieces left and a happily munching masked Junin. God damn it, he thought. Uruka scarfed up 2 pieces as Kakashi scored another. The lone piece sat on the plate as Iruka swallowed hurriedly and reached for the last piece. He secured the piece, but as he tried to pick it up, another set of chopsticks latched on. Iruka, Gomen, I didn't realize you wanted his piece, said Kakashi. No worries Kakashi-san, Iruka said pleasantly with his eyes glaring. Despite Kakashi's chivalrous words, the grip on this sushi was like iron. The two stayed locked as Iruka tried to free his sushi from the villain's grasp. Iruka gritted his teeth. I can't budge, he thought. Anko, who had consumed enough sake equal to the rest the table's population, woke up from the little nap she was taking. Yay, she cheered, seeing the two nins in a deadlock, chopstick battle. She grabbed her utensils and stabbed towards the food. Iruka lurched with effort, trying to lift the poor eel roll from the complete annihilation Anko's involvement brought. Kakashi seemed to agree, and together they raised their locked chopsticks to safety as Anko's hand impacted with splintering wood on the plate. A lone chopstick shot through the air and like a shuriken sliced through the eel, splitting it in two. Iruka's arm recoiled with his half a piece in hand and turned to see Asuma smile at them and making the peace sign. Kakashi chuckled at the result and devoured his half. The Chunin could only do the same. The meal was mostly finished when Anko got a second wind. Bored now, she complained. Leaning over, she dug under the table for something and came up with a triumphant look that elicited a collective groan from the other three Junin. Karaoke, she squealed. In her hands was a little karaoke player that he learned from the others was her pride and joy. She immediately jumped into setting it up before anyone could say more. The problem is, Kurenai said to him in a hushed tone, Anko's the only one who wants to sing. Iruka teased, I'll be happy to sing, but I'd need a little more sake first. Asuma's eyes lit up as he moved to pour Iruka another cup, despite the other man's protest. Well, come on man, drink up. Anko doesn't have the best voice in the world. You'll at least break it up before her encore gets ear-splitting. Iruka had stuck his foot in mouth, and now all three Junin pressing him. He was still reluctant until the first strains of a tune were coming from the little player. Anko's on again, off again relationship with melody soon became quite apparent. He needed little prompting after that. The night air felt wonderfully cool to Iruka as he was carried outside piggyback by Kakashi. Kurenai following right behind the pair, with Anko being carted in like fashion by Asuma. Bye-bye, Iruka-kun, yelled Anko from 2 feet away. Bye-bye, Anko-chan, yelled Iruka back. The Chunin sensei was plastered. Guess it's time to put the kids to bed, said Kakashi jokingly. Kurenai put her hand over her mouth to hide the smile. Hi, said Asuma, have a good night, fellas. Don't you doing anything to Iruka-kun, Kakashi, said Anko heatedly. I know how your dirty, little mind works. The world is spinning. Kurenai, it's some powerful genjutsu. Quick counter. Asuma and Kurenai, who had turned and began walking while Anko was still speaking, faded away into the night along with her non-stop yammering. Kakashi sighed and turned to stroll the opposite way. Iruka suddenly realized he didn't know where they were going. Where are you taking me, Kakashi? He yelled. I'm going to drop you in that trash can over there if you scream in my ear again, the Junin said with slight menace. Of course, if it gets back to Anko, there'd be some explaining to do and that could get messy. Kakashi gave a slight chuckle at the thought of that predicament. I didn't know you two were that close. She's very protective of you. Iruka was thrown off by the talkative scarecrow. She's always been that way, since we were kids, he mumbled. However, Kakashi made no sign that he'd heard Iruka and continued to casually walk in the direction of Iruka's home. I didn't know you had such a good singing voice, he said, complimenting his parcel. I'm not that good, said Iruka modestly before turning evil. It's just Anko sounds like a cat that's been stepped on. The two laughed softly. Why didn't you take a turn? Oh, me, said Kakashi humorously, I sort of sound like a crow that's been stepped on. They laughed again. The silver-haired man began to hum along to a tune from earlier in the night's little concert. That final song you did with both Anko and Kurenai was catchy, he said to Iruka. It was foreign, right? How did it go? Kakashi began to sing in a baritone accompanied by a little dancing that bounced Iruka up and down. Sitting on a mountaintop. She. Burning like a silver. Stop it, please. Goddess of. Quote, I'm gonna be sick. Kakashi chuckled a little, ending his sadistic fun to return walking Iruka homeward. He didn't bothering his passenger with any more conversation. Sure that the Junin had finally stopped dancing, Iruka relaxed and let his head rest on the larger man's shoulder. The silence gave him the opportunity to note some things about this annoying, mysterious man up close. Iruka could feel the power his body held as he shifted underneath him in walking, but that was to be expected of a Junin. It was other things that intrigued him. With his ear against him, Iruka could hear Kakashi's heartbeat as it ran just slower than his own, with a deeper rhythm cycling in and out with his breaths, long and steady. His unusually colored hair appeared completely natural and not dyed, which someone might think at first glance. Iruka moved his head a little so his cheek could brush up against it, and he was surprised how soft it felt. He sort of expected it to be coarse and to smell bad. Actually, it didn't smell bad at all, just the opposite. He looked up a little and noticed Kakashi's ear, the tiny hairs on it reflecting in the moonlight. Looking at it, Iruka felt the strongest urge to blow on it lightly. He knew he shouldn't as he breathed in anyway. Alas, Iruka's playtime was brought to an abrupt close as he fell onto something, hitting down hard. He exhaled in shock as Kakashi stood over him. Ride's over, Iruka's former bearer informed him. Iruka saw he was dropped onto the park bench in front of his apartment. OWW, what the hell did you do that for? He asked Kakashi. I told you to get down twice, the Junin said calmly, but you seem to be in your own little world. Iruka thought was lying, he was sure he'd have heard him. I should have known you'd be an asshole even taking me home, Iruka spat back. The foul language out of the normally polite man amused the Junin. Well, someone gets a potty mouth when he's tipsy, Kakashi said mockingly, crossing his arms. I am sure your years of ninja training can get you up the steps and through the door. Or did you expect me to put you in your pajamas and tuck you in too? Iruka's mouth worked, but no words came out, an all too familiar redness flooding his face. Kakashi put his foot on the bench next to Iruka and bent in close to bring his masked face nose to nose with Iruka. Isn't that what you wanted to happen? He asked playfully. Iruka's eyes widened fearful as he tried lean back further. I don't know what you're talking about. You're insane, he yelled. Kakashi said, no, I'm not. You couldn't take your eyes off me all night. The Junin looked down briefly, then smiled widely under his camouflage. He moved in an unhurriedly fashion to get up and walk away. Don't be afraid, Iruka. I want you to be eager, willing and completely sober, he said as he departed. You and your little friend have a good night. Iruka was confused. My little friend. He looked down at his lap and spied what Kakashi had earlier. He turned the color of a beet with a groan. Screw you, Kakashi. Hi, another time, the Scarecrow Nin called back with a wave. Sweet dreams, Iruka-kun. Iruka was steaming, and knowing he should just shut up, he screamed one more thing at the retreating figure. And my friends, not little. As it hit Iruka that he just publicly defended his manhood at 2 o'clock in morning on a bench in front of his house, he laid back, arching over of the bench in disgust. With his arms hanging, he watched his house from an upside-down perspective, praying silently that his landlady, Ms. Tanaka, had not been awaked by his tirade. He waited till the danger time had passed, then dragged himself up to his waiting bed. Getting ready to go to sleep, Iruka continued to grumble to himself about how his night had been hijacked and how a certain bastard with a shitty grin tortured him all the way home. Later, as he passed out, the tightness and creases of worry melted from the young sensei's face, replaced with a wide contented smile. It was a smile that betrayed the happiness he'd gotten out of his hijacked evening, and it was accompanied with a small wish that more unexpected things like that would happen in the future.